All right, a few more. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the EDA American Rescue Plan webinar for the Western region. Hillary Sherman will join us here in a minute. I just wanted to let you know we are going to record. I will be monitoring the chat, and there may not be a lot of time for questions, but we'll try to get to that at the end. So I am Erica Anderson. I'm the Economic Community Development Director at Land of Sky Regional Council, and we are covering the counties of Madison, Buncombe, Henderson, and Transylvania counties, and provide services to our local governments and partners within those counties and jurisdictions within. Russ or Sarah Thompson, if you are on, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Erica. I am Russ Harris. I am Director of Community and Economic Development for the Southwestern Commission. We are the Council of Governments for the 7 far western counties in the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians.
And Phil or Julie?
Sorry, all. Julie Wiggins with the High Country Council of Governments serving the Northwestern corner. And Phil, I'll let you introduce yourself as well. Sorry, Phil, we can't hear you.
You look unmuted. Oh, still not.
And Phil True, Planning and Economic Development Director here in the, as I said, in the Northwestern corner. It's great to see you all.
Thank you all. Hillary, would you like to? There you go. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Erica. I really appreciate you and Julie and Phil and Russ and Sarah and the entire team. It's a pleasure to have the chance to share with you a little bit more details regarding EDA's American Rescue Plan Act funds. Some of you have sat through the details shared by our headquarters office. And today I'm going to try to walk the needle of sharing the high level stuff and make sure that the intent of the programs is clear, but also getting down to some of the technical details. There's a lot in the 6 notice of funding opportunities. So I'm going to do my best to try to kind of get through the material as quickly as I can, but also as thoroughly as I can. This webinar probably won't answer everything, but I hope that at least everybody walks away with clarity and new information on programs they're interested in, and would be happy to answer questions after this webinar. We may have time for questions at the very end, so please feel free to use the chat function, and Eric has graciously agreed to monitor that for us, and we will commit to following up with anybody who has questions that we don't get to. My slides is, let's see, 1 second, the view is a little bit different than it was 2 seconds ago, so I want to make sure you guys are seeing. Okay, is it full screen now? Okay, great. So I'm seeing many familiar faces and some new faces. So just for context, EDA offers a range of grant programs that are really designed to provide a diverse array of grant resources to really fill out and support the broad array of needs communities have to support economic development. We know that in some communities that looks like traditional water and sewer projects or stormwater projects. In other communities, that might be really focused on building entrepreneurship assets or really supporting the business needs in terms of access to capital. EDA has a wide array of resources designed to meet these various community needs. And I think it's important to understand that as EDA developed the American Rescue Plan Act funding guidelines, we were very intentional in terms of thinking about the wide portfolio of needs communities have, and to try to adapt programs to be responsive and potentially catalytic in terms of facilitating economic recovery. As EDA makes grant investments, all of our grants are guided by agency investment priorities. This is true for the American Recovery Act as well as our normal programs. I think it's number one important to recognize that all American Rescue Act plans must align with the recovery and resiliency goal of the agency. So this is about projects that will help the community or the region identified to be better able to withstand future natural or economic dislocations and to recover from the existing challenges that they face, be it the coronavirus under the ARP funds or by other economic dislocations. But it's important to note that EDA recognizes that that is but one of many important investment priorities. And applicants are encouraged to address how they meet all of the investment priorities that they do. Projects that meet more than one investment priority, whether it be for the American Rescue Act or EDA's regular programs, may be more competitive than projects that just hit one of these. I want to make sure that the two of these are I think most of these are self-evident, but two I want to call out specifically. The first one is equity. EDA is very interested in looking at how the benefits of the federal investment may be connected to or may benefit communities that have been historically underinvested in. And this could be communities that are rural in nature that have not had the same amount of investment. It could be kind of pockets of poverty, so census tracts within larger urban areas that have not enjoyed the same investment levels of surrounding areas. It could be about making sure that the access to the investment is open to populations that have seen significant impacts as a result of the coronavirus, including racial minorities and women. So we're really open to thinking about equity broadly and are really asking applicants to be intentional and clear with us about how they see their applications addressing that priority goal. Additionally, under environmentally sustainable development, EDA looks at this in a multifaceted way. And we think about green processes and green products, as well as green construction. So applicants are invited and encouraged to think about whether the construction techniques that will be employed might be environmentally sustainable, whether the products that are developed by the company may be perhaps made with recycled materials, or may be in some ways otherwise benefiting environmentally sustainable development. Or whether the process that is used to develop that, for example, might be used using more efficient technologies that require less water usage. So there's a multitude of ways to hit that investment priority. And if you have questions on that, I'd be happy to answer that. But again, all American Rescue Act funds have to hit the recovery and resilience priority, but hitting more than one can be a competitive factor. All of these funds are included and are put into the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. Again, this is one of EDA's programs, but EDA has a number of programs outside of that. What this means is that EDA's existing requirements for property ownership and EDA's existing regulations and construction requirements, all of those requirements still are in effect. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit about what that means for the various programs. As the agency looked at how to allocate the $3 billion given to it under the American Rescue Plan, the things that we were really intentional about trying to focus on was, what are the activities that might help support economic recovery today? What are the things that might help support economic recovery tomorrow? and what are the things that have the broadest potential for really stimulating strategic, catalytic investments that can really transcend opportunities and pull in and make opportunities better connected to communities that have not enjoyed the fruits of that. So you can see that we've allocated the 6 notice of funding opportunities that have been announced under this accordingly. Within these 6 notice of funding opportunities, you may have seen the EDA has made a commitment of $300 million that will go out of that $3 billion towards coal communities. So this can be for communities that have a direct or a supply chain impact to adverse impacts from the coal closures or reductions in the supply chain. This is a floor, so it could be higher, but EDA has made a commitment that at least $300 million in various programs will be allocated to help support these communities because we know that they've been hard hit as a result of compounding challenges. Additionally, the congressional appropriations language for the ARP funds directed EDA to allocate 25% of the $3 billion to the American Rescue Plan. So as we think about the overall portfolio, as we talked about here, these were 2 other items that kind of guided where we ended up investing. And what you see here is the list of the 6 notice of funding opportunities, which we're going to talk about in just a second in more detail. I think it's important to note that the $300 million coal communities commitment is specifically pointed to or coming from $100 million out of the Build Back Better challenge and the $200 million out of the economic adjustment assistance. So what is the takeaway for you out of that? If you're interested in applying for either of those programs and you can make a case for direct or indirect impacts to coal communities, it would be advantageous for you to do so. So I'm going to go through the programs in more detail. I'm going to focus on 4 specifically, and the other 2 I'm going to hit fairly high level, but happy to, again, to answer the questions you may have, and feel free to enter them into the chat. So in the statewide planning and grants, this is a direct, non-competitive grant at 100% grant level to the states. So EDA has been in contact with the governor's office and the Department of Commerce regarding this, and we will be giving $1 million to the state to help facilitate economic planning activities that will support economic recovery from the coronavirus. That scope of work is still in the process of being delineated, but that is underway, and that will total from all the states and territories to the $59 million total. Additionally, EDA has a competitive application available for $31 million total into basically 2 different pots. First one being research and evaluation to help guide and inform us as we look at how effective our funding strategy and practices are under the ARP Act. Additionally, EDA recognizes there's tremendous potential for facilitating coordination among investments. And so we are looking for building up communities of practice to really take the lessons learned that come out of this and our prior work and really kind of turbocharge them, if you will, and make sure that those successes are available to any interested party. Those 2 opportunities have a rolling deadline, and interested parties to those are encouraged to go to the eda.gov website to get more information. And this is one that I know that there's a tremendous amount of interest on. This is a Build Back Better challenge. And this is $1 billion that has been allocated out of the $3 billion total to help look at how EDA might substantially transform economic recovery in areas. This is about looking at a sector that has the greatest potential to facilitate economic recovery, about thinking about the assets of that sector and the component organizations involved with that, and considering 3 to 8 specific projects that can be proposed that, if they were implemented concurrently, would have maximum value for yielding economic opportunity and return in that region. Again, under this competition, we are envisioning $100 million as a minimum to go to coal, to the coal impact. And projects that are proposed in this can be planning infrastructure, workforce, and entrepreneurship. So how is this actually going to work in practice, right? So this is a two-phase challenge. In the first phase, this is what I would call maybe the ideation. This is where we're asking teams to come together to identify a lead partner and to have a team of other relevant partners for that cluster, to identify the cluster or sector that is driving or could drive a regional economy, and to propose that industry, that vision for the 3 to 8 projects in a high-level conceptual outline by October 19th, 2021. Those that are selected, and EDA anticipates selecting 50 to 60 regions through that phase 1. Those that are selected will receive up to $500,000 for a 100% grant award. That grant award will essentially be for a wide array of activities, including preliminary engineering reports or environmental narratives necessary to flesh out those 3 to 8 projects. So if you, for example, were in phase 1 telling us that you wanted to build an innovation lab, in phase 2, it's going to be how many square feet, where's it going to be, who's going to hold the title to it, how are you going to bid it. So phase 2 is going to be the details. Phase 1 is, this is what we want to do. Applicants that are successful in phase 2, or in phase 1, excuse me, will be invited forward to submit in phase 2. So you have to submit and go through phase 1 in order to be eligible to submit phase 2. And EDA envisions making 20 to 30 regional awards where there's going to be the 3 to 8 projects kind of invited forward concurrently, where the total of all of those investments, those 3 to 8, will be somewhere between 25 and 100 million. EDA envisions that those awards will be at an 80% grant rate. And the deadline for that phase 2 is March 15th of 2022. So let's talk about a little bit more details on this. In order to have a complete phase 1 application, you're going to have to submit all the phase 1 concept proposal documents required starting on page 17 in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. That entire application has to be submitted no later than 11:59 Eastern Time on October 19th, 2021. EDA anticipates that we're going to be reviewing very, very quickly once we get that, and that we would make the $500,000 awards ideally and as a goal by December 8th, 2021. So that's our intention, so that the recipients will be able to turn around and move forward with the planning necessary for phase 2. The phase 2, as I mentioned, is going to include that high-level concept proposal that is selected as a finalist under phase 1. And the applicants for that project must be a member of the coalition that it was associated with that initial concept proposal. All phase 2 projects must be a part of the phase 2 application submitted to EDA. So you could not use funds, for example, to build a workforce training center as part of the implementation of phase 2 if that's not proposed to EDA in phase 2. So in phase 1, you're going to tell us, here's what we want to do, really high level, here's the cluster it's going to support, here's the potential of this, here's the partners, here's the assets. Phase 2, you're going to be telling us how it's going to coordinate together, how it's going to be connected, what's the potential for it. But you're going to identify each of these 3 to 8 individual projects and really be able to propose to EDA the scope of that. Phase 2 projects are going to be submitted no later than 11:59 Eastern Time on March 15th, 2022. And EDA anticipates making the grant awards no later than September of 2022. So who is eligible to be a Build Back Challenge recipient? The applicant eligibility for this is going to look very familiar for folks who are familiar with EDA. Basically, it's anybody except for individuals or for-profit entities. EDA and the Build Back Better is asking for a lead applicant, and they're going to be the ones who do the federal the suite of federal forms in that phase one, but all the key partners who are going to have the lead at each of those individual projects is also going to have to be an eligible applicant. In terms of what's ineligible, EDA does not fund for-profit facilities, and we do not fund individual facilities. EDA also will not fund residential properties or properties that are primarily residential in nature, or community amenities, so swimming pools, zoos, rec centers. We don't fund general governmental facilities like firehouses or police stations or public safety. And our funds are not designed to provide just general operational support or replace lost revenue. So in terms of matching share, I mentioned that phase one, that up to $500,000 is envisioned as a 100% federal grant rate. So there's no match envisioned on that to allow applicants to be able to turn around and get the pieces together very quickly. Phase two is expected to be an 80% grant rate. So that means for each individual project that you propose, you're going to have an 80% federal request and a 20% match. For construction projects, the most competitive position is going to be cash. For non-construction, the most competitive position can be cash or in kind. In terms of what match means, match has to be what we consider available and committed, unencumbered, and from available sources. So your direct Treasury ARP funds are not eligible to be matched on Build Back Better or any EDA grant program. It would need to come from other sources. Other grant programs like Golden Leaf or Cannon Foundation or other foundational grants are eligible as match as long as they're for the same scope and are actually have the grant award. And state programs can be matched as long as the funds are coming from state sources. In terms of that phase one, EDA has kind of detailed a long list of requirements beginning on page 17 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. I will note that phase one, there's a concept proposal requested. There's a maximum of 5 pages requested in that. Anything more than 5 pages will not be reviewed. There are font sizes and margin sizes included in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which are detailed here. Please keep those as they exist and do not exceed the 5-page limit. There's a pretty big detail in this regarding the requirement of an applicant to identify the regional assets, the industry leadership, the sustainability, and the equity. So what we're asking applicants to do is, again, think about that industry. You're talking about aerospace, you're talking about outdoor manufacturing, or you're talking whatever industry you pick. Think about the industry, and then talk about the regional assets, the industry leadership, the sustainability, and the equity of that cluster, of that sector that you identify. So not just generally, but it's of that cluster. And then what are your projects and components of that cluster? The lead applicant at the phase one phase is going to be the one who submits the federal forms as noted here. Please note if the nonprofit is the one who's going to be the lead, you will need to submit your bylaws, your articles of incorporation, and your certificate of good standing at the time of that phase one application. Full details of all the requirements for that phase one are detailed on page 17 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So I mentioned that phase two is only available to those who go through and are successful in that phase one. So those recipients who receive a phase one award will receive a portal, and that portal will be the mechanism by which they will be able to apply for phase two funding. You'll see here that the requirements for phase two include the overarching narrative that's got a 10-page limit, as well as more details on that regional assets, the industry leadership, the sustainability, and the equity. Additionally, there's a complete application, as I would call it, the full suite of federal forms and details for each individual project. So if in your mind, you might think about each individual project as a standalone project, but it has to be connected and coordinated, which is what that overarching narrative and the regional assets, industry leadership, sustainability, and equity is trying to get at. Full details for all phase 2 requirements are noted beginning on page 19. And I would strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to read that page. It goes through bullets and sub-bullets on what needs to be in that 10-page narrative. And it even includes recommendations on how long each subcomponent should be included. So if you're thinking about how much detail do I put into this, it will tell you this should be a page or this should be half a page. Make sure that you're using those resources that are there. So how do you find out more details? If you go to eda.gov and you go to funding opportunities, the first one down is the American Rescue Act. And then you can click on the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. I will note, you see here in the kind of orangish color at the top, EDA does not require any kind of personal information to apply. We do not request you to pay anything to apply. We are having an issue with folks, for all intents and purposes, lying and telling people that in order to apply for EDA funds, that there's a charge for that. And so that is not in any way true. It is a totally open and pretty transparent process. And so if you were contacted by anybody or asked to provide funding to be able to apply for EDA or anything in that vein, please note the Office of Inspector General information here, and please do refer information so that we can make sure that that doesn't happen to anybody. When you go to grants.gov, once you clicked back from this side, if you clicked on the Build Back Better Challenge, it will take you to the grants.gov site. And again, this is the portal by which all federal grants are submitted, and it does not require any kind of personal information to be submitted with it. But notice a funding opportunity that I referenced several times during this part of the conversation is under related documents. So if you don't know where that is, go under related documents, you can pull it up and you can actually access the PDF for the notice of funding opportunity. That details all the details and requirements for the funding availability. The package is actually where the phase 1 will be submitted. So you can see the general information that's required there. Key things you need to know. This is not funds to come in for a single $100 million project. EDA is envisioning that the total of the 3 to 8 projects that are proposed to advance that industry will sum to between $25 and $100 million. But each individual project will be less than that, so that the aggregate can be that. So we're looking for that complementary projects, not a single individual project. If a project is submitted as part of the application for Build Back Better, it may not be selected under another American Rescue Act Plan award unless and until EDA determines that it was unsuccessful in the Build Back Better competition. Applicants can be party to more than one challenge based on our understanding at the moment, but the projects may not be selected under another ARP award if they're going to be selected under the Build Back Better Challenge. Strongly recommend applicants not to forget about the coal commitment. Applicants are welcome to provide whatever data that they have to document the direct or indirect supply chain impacts to their region or the region identified as part of the application. You will not find a place to do that in the application itself. You will need to create a separate Word document probably and upload that as part of your application package to EDA. So in grants.gov, in your workspace, upload coal impacts and provide that to EDA. These are federal funds, and so everything's subject to federal procurement rules, construction requirements, and property requirements. So anything that EDA builds or improves may not be sold to a private entity and must usually be retained for its useful life for 20 years, and the EDA asset may not be used as collateral for another loan. So make sure that you're aware of that going into it. And no work may proceed until and if EDA makes an award. So you're going to be able to hold going out to bid, hold going out to doing any kind of work on a project until after EDA makes a grant award. And then obviously any kind of grant application to EDA is going to have be submitted via grants.gov. And so you're going to need a DUNS and an AOR number. Okay, the travel and tourism and outdoor recreation. This is a $750 million pot of funding, EDA has allocated the funding into two components. There's the state non-competitive grants, and there's the challenge competitive grants. Under the state grants, there's a formula that's based on adverse impacts from the coronavirus and looking at losses to tourism and leisure. North Carolina is getting a little bit more than 6.4 million, and we have been in contact with the governor's office and EDPNC and NC Commerce, and they are working through the determination of how that will be allocated. That will be 100% grant award from EDA to the state based in accordance with the notice of funding opportunity under that. Under the challenge grant, there's 240 million nationwide. The way that that will work is that there's a little bit more than 24.3 million that's allocated to the Atlanta regional office. There are 8 states, so 7 plus North Carolina, 8 states total, that compete for funding out of the Atlanta regional office. So just be aware of how that funding will work. Is not allocated to the state. It's held at the Atlanta regional office, and all North Carolina projects will be competing against other applications from those 7 other states for that pot of funding. EDA prefers projects that directly support the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation sectors. We will consider diversification projects, but that may not be the best. This may not be the best program to consider that. That may be something that's better suited for the economic adjustment assistance. Just be mindful of that. Under this challenge, EDA does anticipate awarding both construction and non-construction projects. Just keep in mind that EDA considers those separate projects. So if you're coming in, for example, for a assessment of how the tourism potential of developing a potential asset, and then you want to build or improve a tourism asset, those are 2 separate projects. That is not a single application. There's a non-construction project there, and there's a construction project there. So be mindful about that. Funds on this are really intended to be used to support new and expanded infrastructure. A big focus here on regional impacts or areas that have had the greatest impacts to the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation sectors as a result of the coronavirus. On page 7 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and I'll note that this, I'm referring now to page 7 of the Travel and Tourism and Outdoor Recreation Notice of Funding Opportunity. Each of these has its own separate Notice of Funding Opportunity. So when you see on the slides, Notice of Funding Opportunity or NOFO, I'm referring to that specific NOFO. So on page 7, it lists a number of types of construction projects, including port improvements, water and sewer infrastructures, that kind of things, trail development. This is not an inclusive list. These are illustrative projects. So any construction project must be owned by an eligible applicant, and they just need to meet the goals of the program, which we'll talk about more in just a second. Because the state non-competitive funds are allowed to cover and support travel and tourism promotion and marketing projects, these types of activities may not be eligible under the challenge grant. So if you are a community and you're interested in a ad buy or developing a website to help get folks come to your community, it's probably not going to be eligible under this, given this prohibition. That we do not know what the state is going to do on that, and as soon as we have that information, we will be working to make sure the folks are clear in terms of what that scope of work is. In terms of what's ineligible here, what you're going to see is that there's a lot of the same types of things that are ineligible as under the Build Back Better. So EDA, again, does not fund residential types of activities. We don't fund things for for-profit entities or individuals. We're not funding casinos or gaming. We don't fund community amenities. But you'll see here that the list of this has changed. So before it said swimming pools, rec centers, and zoos. You'll see now that zoos have been removed. So they are an eligible activity under the Travel, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation Challenge. We're not going to fund municipal or safety operations under this. And again, we cannot fund lost revenue or just general operational costs. In terms of eligible applicants, these are going to be the same applicants as I went through before. Big prohibition here is we can't fund individuals and we can't fund for-profit entities. So if you're looking for the travel and tourism outdoor rec, you've got to be a public entity or a nonprofit working in collaboration with the local government. Travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation challenge grants are anticipated to be funded at the 80% grant rate. The Notice of Funding Opportunity talks about a range of $500,000 to $10 million. As applicants are thinking about what the appropriate ask is, they should request the funds that they need to do the project, keeping in mind the EDA Atlanta Regional Office has a little bit more than $24 million for the region for all 8 states. So a $10 million ask is about half of what's available. So something to consider. And so definitely the larger the available request, the larger and greater the regional impact and the economic ability to facilitate recovery from the coronavirus. In terms of match, we're looking at the very same requirements under the travel, tourism, and outdoor rec. Do you have the funds? Are they in hand, or are you just applying for them? We want to see if you're going to use let's just take a Golden Leaf again. If you're going to use a Golden Leaf Grant Award, do you have the Golden Leaf Grant Award in hand? Is it for the same scope? Is it from eligible sources? ARA direct funds are not matched again under this. In terms of submitting this is going to come in through grants.gov, and you are going to need a SAM and AOR in order to apply. And AOR stands for Authorized Organizational Representative, and that is a status that each organization will designate. And that person is the one who is allowed to submit an application on behalf of the organization. Many organizations only have one AOR. Keep in mind some of these deadlines, and keep in mind that the holidays will be fast approaching us, even though it seems like so far away from now. So I would strongly recommend that you're having conversations with whoever the AOR is. So if folks are going to be out on leave, that you're not put in a pinch for any of these grant competitions. The deadline enlisted for the competitive grant portion is January 31st, 2022. However, please note the EDA is going to be reviewing applications on a rolling basis as they come in. It is strongly advisable that any interested applicant moves forward as expeditiously as possible to getting their application in to be considered. I fully expect the demand for available resources to far outstrip the available resources. So being able to move forward quickly is going to be advantageous. And then applications must be complete to be reviewed, and that complete list of application requirements starts on page 16 of the Travel and Tourism and Outdoor Rec Notice of Funding Opportunity. In terms of how these are going to be reviewed, it's outlined pretty extensively in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, but I want to call out that there's a specific list of them as outlined here. We're going to be looking at the extent to which the project is going to be helping facilitate recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. So we're going to be asking applicants to think about how was the region served by the coronavirus, resulted or suffered job losses or GDP losses in the travel, tourism, and outdoor rec, and that can be in aggregate or it could be in certain sectoral levels. We're going to be looking at how the project is really going to help support and mitigate the needs that the communities have expressed as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, and how this may help the community become more resilient to future dislocations. Obviously, the feasibility and the durability of the project. If we're building something, who's going to operate and maintain it after it's constructed? If it's a kind of non-construction project or report, who's going to use the report? What are they going to do with it? Again, you see the reference to the alignment with the EDA investment priorities. So projects that hit more than one, have a greater competitive probability than those that just hit one. So I encourage you to strongly detail how you can hit as many of those as possible. And then one of the things that's really important is EDA is increasingly looking at the extent to which the benefits of a project are going to be accrued broadly within the community. So we want to see applicants kind of talk about how there's going to be kind of shared benefits if the region across the region. And there's various ways, applicants may do that, but we're really looking for the applicant to kind of tell us what that story is. You'll see kind of similar things to know in this as it is to Build Back Better. And again, this has been, all these funds is put under the Economic Adjustment Assistance pot of funding. So our regulations and property requirements are all the same. So you're talking about federal procurement rules, still the same, construction rules, still the same. In terms of property requirements, the applicant's going to have to hold that property for 20 years. If you're building an asset, you can't turn around and sell it to a private vendor 10 years from now. No work is going to be able to proceed until if and when EDA makes a grant award. So if you've got a project you're in process with, and you just have a bid overrun, EDA is probably not the best agency for you. We want a scoped out project for, here's how our region has been adversely impacted by the coronavirus. Here's the economic potential of this. Here's what we want to do, and here's what the return will be. Please note that this is going to come in again via grants.gov. You're going to have a DUNS and AOR on this, and the match is going to have to be committed and available at the time of application. The Notice of Funding Opportunity similarly is going to be under the Related Documents tab in grants.gov, and the full package is going to be available under the Package tab. The Economic Adjustment Assistance is what I consider our most flexible program, and so this program is available to support a wide array of construction. That could be either new construction or renovation, technical assistance planning, or capitalization or recapitalization of revolving loan fund programs. In the region, we have broad coverage of revolving loan funds, and generally EDA does not fund overlapping revolving loan funds to ensure the effectiveness of those that we have in place. So we would be open to recapitalization of revolving loan funds from those entities that we currently have if there's a need for that, but generally we would not fund overlapping revolving loan funds. In terms of this program, I think it's really important to note, this is one of the ones that EDA has the $200 million coal communities commitment. And so projects that can make a case to direct or supply chain impacts from the coal industry losses should include a document including coal impacts as part of their application. There's not going to be a form for that. You're going to need to just provide a narrative to that, and again, upload that as an additional attachment in your workspace, and perhaps label it as coal impacts. The Notice of Funding Opportunity talks about a deadline of March 31st, 2022. EDA, similarly to the Travel and Tourism Challenge, is going to be reviewing applications on a rolling basis. I also expect applications for this to be far exceeding available resources, so would strongly encourage applicants to move forward in terms of submitting applications as soon as available. In terms of what funding is available, EDA is expecting to make about 300 awards, and that's approximate, that's not a guarantee, but approximately 300 awards of non-construction and construction character that will range between $500,000 and $5 million. We're expecting the non-construction type projects to generally be between 1 to 2 years, and the construction projects to generally be between 1 to 4 years. In terms of the matching share, EDA is expecting these to be 80% grant amounts. So that range I talked about, that's the federal range, the $500,000 to $5 million, but it would require a 80% grant amount. So the total project cost will be in excess of that. The match, the 20% match for construction projects, generally the most competitive position is going to be cash. Again, you're going to either, if you're applying for grant sources, you're going to have that match in hand. If you are doing a non-construction project, it could be cash or in kind. It's just got to be fairly valued and documented as when you submit the application. Keeping in mind that the direct Treasury ARP funds you have are not eligible as match for this program either. Eligible applicants, again, here the same thing, no private businesses, no individuals. In terms of the ineligible projects, again, the similar list, you'll see that zoos have been added back in here. So the only program that we can do zoos is going to be travel and tourism, but otherwise a pretty similar list to what we talked about before. So what's going to make a complete application when you're submitting the list of the applicant for the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program? Well, obviously having the complete application materials that are listed in the page 14 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which is going to be the federal forms. If it's a construction project, it's going to include your preliminary engineering report and your environmental narrative. If you are doing a construction project, making sure that you're using the most current version of the environmental narrative is important. If you go to eda.gov and you look at your funding opportunities tab and you scroll to the very, very bottom, there's a document that actually comes up as a Word document when you download it that's labeled Environmental Narrative and Applicant Certification Clause. Those are listed in the application as two separate things, but they're in that form as the same thing. What gets confusing is that last 3 pages are the applicant certification clause, and those actually have to be manually signed by the applicant's fiduciary agent or authorized agent when they submit the application. If an applicant is interested in doing an incubator or an accelerator, please pay special attention to page 20 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. For those types of projects, EDA has additional requirements, including things like a feasibility study, a market analysis, an operations and management plan that is based on EDA's work with incubators and accelerators and our experience on what makes a project most likely to be successful. EDA is allowed to, or it can permit indirect costs under the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. For construction projects, EDA does not allow indirect cost rates. For non-construction projects, you either must have an improved indirect cost rate that you include and upload as part of your application with the application for the Economic Adjustment Assistance, or you're charging the 10% de minimis rate in accordance with 2 CFR 200. So again, no indirect cost on construction. Indirect costs can be permitted under Economic Adjustment Assistance if you have that approved rate or if you're using the de minimis rate. And then again, applications must be submitted by March 31st, 2022, but applicants are encouraged to submit earlier than that to be considered. In terms of how applications are going to be reviewed, this is outlined on page 25 in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So we're going to be looking at the extent to which the project is going to be really responsive to how the community's needs are articulated and what the experiences of COVID have been in that community. We're going to be looking at the degree of economic distress in the area, the alignment with the regional SEDS, obviously the feasibility and sustainability of the project, which could include things like, has the project started? Can it follow federal procurement rules? How feasible is this to actually work? How supported is it within the community? A lot of emphasis on the ability of this project as well as others to facilitate good paying jobs. For us, that's going to mean jobs are going to be at or above the county average and ideally include benefits. Additionally, here you see the very last one, and it's listed last, but that does not mean it's least important. All of these are equally weighted in terms of the evaluation criteria. But that last one about EDA encourages applicants to talk about how the project will support and facilitate economic recovery to historically underserved areas, rural areas, minority populations, women. So it's not a requirement, but it is strongly encouraged. And please do note that all factors are weighted equally. So that can be an important thing to include. In terms of noting where the Notice of Funding Opportunity is available, if you go to the eda.gov and you go to funding opportunities, you can click on the American Rescue Act Plan or American Rescue Plan Act, and you can see the Economic Adjustment Assistance under that, and then you could click through. The related documents has Notice of Funding Opportunity. The package has the full package. When you go to the package for this one of the travel and tourism, you'll see a table come up, and this can be a little bit confusing to folks. If you are applying with just a straight non-construction project, you should choose the first one, which is NC for non-construction. If your project is just an equipment, it's going to be an NC project. So if you're looking, for example, at a workforce training center and you just need equipment to go in there, that would be your NC. If you're looking at construction activity, so anything that's going to move earth, that's going to be the second row. It's going to be the EAA-C. Anything that's going to be recapitalizing our revolving loan fund is going to be the third one. And then any project that's going to be just for design or engineering should be the bottom one. That similar guidance will apply to the travel and tourism. I didn't go through that slide on that program. Similar to other programs, EDA does not cover pre-award costs, so any grant development costs are going to be at your own expense. All projects are going to be subject to federal procurement and construction requirements. EDA is going to require that the applicant's going to hold that asset for 20 years, again, that you can't sell that. No work's going to be able to start until after EDA makes the grant award. So think about projects that can start in the future that you're not already in work on or getting ready to go out to bid on. And a match needs to be available and committed at the time of award. EDA has an Indigenous Communities application out. I have been in conversations with members of the Cherokee tribe. They know about this, that we have $100 million currently available. That's 100% grant rate for tribal communities to help support economic recovery from the coronavirus, with a deadline of March 31st, 2022. And then finally, the Good Jobs Challenge. This is about creating and facilitating sectoral partnerships, which will facilitate and strengthen the workforce development systems and ultimately get people back to work. This is envisioned as a system. And so there's 3 different parts that EDA has articulated as part of this. Applicants can do 1, 2, or 3 of these. If you choose not to come in with an application for all 3 of them, the applicant must fully address how their existing infrastructure and systems or designs cover that, meaning that there's no more work needed in that. So the 3 kind of buckets under this include kind of the system development, which is kind of really thinking about funds to really help develop or augment the workforce development system and that sectoral partnerships. The second phase being that program design, which is for funds to train and develop training materials, or to secure technical expertise to really get employers back to work. And then the third one is the program implementation. And this is going to be really funding for support for wraparound services and getting folks connected to quality jobs. These are envisioned as sequential pieces. We see that you have to have a system, and then you have to have a design, and then you have to think about the program implementation. So these are designed to work sequentially, and disbursement will happen accordingly. So before you could move, for example, to program design, you will have to show EDA that you have fully met all the requirements articulated in this funding opportunity for system development if you do not request funds under that. EDA is expecting projects to range from about 2 to 3 years under this, and the deadline is January 26, 2022. This challenge has funds that can be used really for soft projects, and including things like capital expenses, such as equipment purchase and training facility leases. This is not for bricks and mortar. So if you're looking for bricks and mortar, folks should be looking at the EAA, most likely, or regular programs. Applications are going to be submitted via grants.gov, and the list of requirements for that full application is detailed on page 19 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Again, note that EDA does not cover pre-award costs, and the evaluation criteria is detailed on page 27. Again, please don't forget that EDA has regular programs, and we'd be more than happy to talk with you about any needs you have and how they may advance economic recovery and job creation, job retention. For our regular programs, EDA focuses heavily on the opportunity that construction projects, being new construction or renovation projects, might have to facilitate job creation or job retention, and for non-construction projects, the extent to which that will facilitate economic development activities. EDA has a really robust website with a lot of ARPA details, including FAQs and one-page overviews, so I would encourage you to look there. And this is my information. And I'm getting inundated with inquiries right now. So I'm putting my email address because that's the format in which I can be most responsive. But I want to put a plug in for the partnership that EDA has with the councils of governments as economic development districts across the state and definitely across the West. And we work very, very closely together, and look forward to answering questions you may have and supporting you as you move forward with any kind of applications for any of these notice of funding opportunities or regular programs. So Erica, I don't know if we have any questions.
I
Okay.
don't. I've had a couple of people email me about sharing the slides out afterwards, and which I think we can do. And someone asked me earlier about recording this to share with folks who can't make it, which we'll also do. So after Zoom does its thing about recording, then I'll send this out to everyone who registered with a link to the Zoom webinar as well as the slides. Sound okay?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, this is hopefully you know, a little bit more detail than folks and folks found helpful. But if you know, if this made it more confusing, or if you have an idea you want to talk out, you know, please feel free to be in touch with your council of government or myself, and looking forward to answering your questions and supporting you as you move forward. I do not guarantee grant funding. My role is to make sure that everybody has equal access to the information. So looking forward to answering your questions and supporting as I can as you move forward.
I thought this was really helpful. I learned a lot more detail on this than the federal webinars. So thank you, Hillary. And I can speak for ourselves, and then Russ and Julie or Phil, if you want to weigh in, please reach out to us if you have any questions. If you have a project you want to talk through, we can help you navigate that and connect you with others. And Russ, do you have any?
No, I would echo that. We would, you know, urge people to reach out for project development and helping to figure out which bucket may fit best for your project. But I think also it's a little overwhelming right now with all the different funding opportunities that are available right now. And so I think not only with this funding opportunity and finding the right bucket for you, but also just everything that's out there, we'd be happy to kind of help make sense of that as best we can. And thank you, Hillary. That was an hour of solid content. So appreciate your time today.
I'll echo Eric. Can everybody hear me? I'll echo Eric and Russ's comments. Also, if you're in my region and have a project, good to bounce ideas around, but also give me a call pretty early to make sure it's consistent with our SEDS, because that'll be a key component on all these projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I would end by two things is as Russ kind of alluded to, there's a lot of grant opportunities out there. And I think EDA is trying to think about taking advantage of this moment and this opportunity that EDA has with this special pot of funding to be really strategic. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to you know, encourage collaborations and encourage the great conversations I know are going on across the region. There's some really big potentials across North Carolina and across the country, and we're really excited about what that means. But that only happens when the table is broad and partners are brought in and ideas get discussed. So we just encourage that continued conversation, those conversations to be as broad as possible. And to continue you guys to, you know, looking at how you move forward on these, and looking forward to supporting in any way I can as you do so.
Hillary, you mentioned that the direct allocations to the local governments could not be used as their match. How about ARPA money that is gone to the state that may come out in the state budget? Can it be used as match?
We have to look at the statute. It is my expectation that it's probably not going to be allowable as match, but we will have to look at that, and I will commit to following up on that.
Thanks.
Yeah. And just as kind of the arcane back piece on that, it's the rule is we have to look at the authorizing statute of the funding. And so it depends on where exactly the funds are coming from. So the direct treasury funds, we've got a readout on that funding, but anything else I would want to go back to that statute and make sure that I don't give you an ill-advised answer.
And Hillary, there are two quick ones. One is Mike Fenley put a comment in here that if you apply for the grants, don't forget to ask your congressional representatives and senators for support letters, which is a very good reminder. Thank you. And another question, if you have time, Paul submitted one about, given the restrictions of EDA on residential projects, can these funds help support affordable housing initiatives?
So I'd be happy to have an offline conversation in terms of when you say, can these funds help support, what you mean by that. Generally, EDA cannot fund projects that will directly support residential activities, including affordable housing. It may be that there is infrastructure that's going to be primarily oriented to business that has a secondary benefit to affordable housing. And so that's where details matter. And I'll be really happy to have an offline conversation and kind of better understand the question and the specifics, and to see how we could potentially fit in there. But if the question is aimed about just serving a residential or affordable housing, as critical as that is, unfortunately that precludes, EDA statute precludes that as a primary focus. Well, I really appreciate the time. Look forward to questions folks may have and following up, and please don't self-limit. You know, no question is stupid, and really here to kind of help in any way I can as you move forward.
Thank you. Thank you all. We'll be in touch soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.